Hello and welcome to launching a Digital Navigators program at the library. I'm still seeing that there are some folks rolling in, but we're a couple minutes past the hour, so we are just going to get rolling. And I am now going to hit record so that you will be able to watch it later. No, it looks like, sorry, Sabrina, are you already recording? All right, excellent. So welcome all. Hi there. I'm Audrey Barbakoff. I'm the Community Engagement and Economic Development Manager at King County Library System, where we launched a Digital Navigators program about 6 months ago with support from Sabrina and some of her colleagues. So you want to introduce yourself?
Sure thing. I'm Sabrina Roach, Director of Strategic Partnerships at Inclusive Data, supporting the Black Brilliance Research Project out in Seattle. I am in Maryland today. And I previously worked for the National Digital Inclusion Alliance that facilitated the assemblage of the Digital Navigator model. We'll get to that.
So I think we'll just dive right in. So Sabrina has the big picture perspective about what Digital Navigators is, how the model came to be at a high level, how it works, and what its purpose is. And then I can speak to how one library system operationalized that into our workflow to be able to provide the service. And I'm seeing in the chat that someone's added a little bit of context about KCLS, King County Library System, where I work. So if there's, so just to let some folks know what the context for that is. So King County is the county that Seattle, the city of Seattle, is in. And it is the 50 libraries that serve all of the rest of the county except for the city of Seattle, which is the Seattle Public Library is a separate system. We are 50 library locations serving approximately 1.4 million people across 36 municipalities. So we are a large system, and that is the perspective that I am coming from. But I want to be clear that, and Sabrina will talk just a bit about other models and other ways that this has been done, that this does not have to be at a large system. There are library systems that are doing this with one single part-time person or just a little bit of time from a small group of people. So I will talk about how we've done it in what happens to be a large system, but I don't want you to feel that it's necessary to be in a large system to support this model. It's truly not. All right, let's dive into the good stuff.
So the Digital Navigator model came about at the very beginning of the pandemic when we saw schools and libraries having to close their doors. And we just hadn't made a plan for what happens if internet access in congregate settings disappears, like in a week, roughly, just to say that dramatically. Our system, just the tech companies that supply us with the tools and the internet companies that provide the internet to us, like they don't have enough support available to support folks who are seeking this kind of service. So the sort of agreed upon definition among National Digital Inclusion Alliance members is that digital navigators are trusted guides who assist community members in internet adoption and the use of computing devices. One of the key aspects of the model is that it is a way to stack the support for someone who's looking for home internet access devices and a way to start on learning more digital skills. The next slide. So it was a model created by digital inclusion practitioners to expand that social safety net when it comes to the digital space. There just isn't much for that. And the next. a really important component would be the resource guide, what we call the resource guide. And that's just a compendium of localized knowledge for the digital navigator to use in sessions when supporting folks, however they see fit to be supported. But there are some additional positive effects that can have. You can use that sort of thing to strengthen the digital equity ecosystem locally. You can feed that information up to maybe your state broadband office if you're going to be mapping digital divides and assets in the area. So say there's not a lot of information on the ground in your area about where to get low-cost devices. You locate that, you document it in the resource guide, and then you also send that information to the broadband office or some other local entity that's compiling that kind of information. And the next. The model also establishes, if we go back one slide, it also establishes local pathways for updating digital inclusion information. Again, because in our society, we just don't have a lot of this. There aren't a lot of clear pathways. So how do you find out more information about the emergency broadband benefit if you don't know to go to the FCC website or to your local digital inclusion organization website? You could figure that out at an organization like your local library. And the next. These are just some quick URLs to reference. You might find it really useful, and I'll copy the Urban Library Council site that includes the IMLS grant number for the pilot done with Salt Lake City Public Library. I'll just put that in the chat so that you can have access to it. And to you, Audrey.
Thanks, Sabrina. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why and how we implemented this model at King County Library System. And I'll spend a little time on a couple of different specifics, the training, the workflow, and the impact that we've seen for this program. So of course, COVID was the initial impetus for us. Libraries, of course, have always been on the vanguards of digital equity and digital inclusion, right? Since since we first put computers in libraries, way back, really widespread in the 90s, right? We've always been about providing access to the world of information and ideas for everyone, regardless of what they can afford in their home, and however it is that you can get that. It was books, it still is books at times, it's periodicals, now it's websites, right? It's internet. It's so, and I'm hearing that I'm a little hard to hear. Is this better? Can you hear me better now? Sabrina, will you give me like a thumbs up, thumbs down? All right, thank you very much. Digital equity has always been a really important part of what we do and the services we offer to the community. So when we had to close our doors, it became really essential to say, we know that people are relying on us. They're relying on us for their internet. They're relying on us for their access to computers. They're relying on us for help, right? Maybe they can afford those things, but they need someone to they need someone to give them a hand in accomplishing the goals that they want to with those things. And while we could no longer do that in our physical buildings, the digital navigator model gave us a way to do all three of those things at once in a distributed environment. And because of that, another reason that we wanted to adopt it is that that awareness might have started with COVID, but it does not end with COVID. The need for the support has long been there, and it's going to continue to be there. So I see this as a really sustainable long-term model, even though it started with a particular emergency situation in mind. In brief, the way that this works at KCLS is we use staff. Other places use volunteers. So we offered a training And this was, we did secure some grant funding up front to bring on NDIA to deliver their training to us. They've now made much of that material freely available in those toolkits that Sabrina showed to you. So do go and check those out. We worked with them to adapt their training. So they offered about 90 minutes a day over a course of 4 days. And staff were introduced to some of the best resources for locating affordable and subsidized home broadband access programs, finding subsidized devices. And we had some of our leadership, our steering group for this program, did some of that research in advance as well, to say those hyper local things, right? Those charities that are refurbishing devices for people that NDIA might not be aware of as a national organization. They told us about those big things, and we were able to fill in the gaps with the more local stuff. And we talked about digital literacy needs as well. What are the things people are looking for? What are the kinds of resources that are most likely to be helpful for them? And we opened that training up to other nearby library systems since we know that their staff are also addressing all of the same issues. Although we used grant funding up front to do that, we have no separate ongoing costs for this program. We are carving it all out of existing staff time, existing equipment, and resources. That may or may not be the case for your library. You might have some funding to bring on someone specific, or you might need a particular program, but just that's how it's playing out here. So here's there's a lot of detail on this slide, and I'm not going to dive into all of it because we don't have that much time. But I want to give you a general sense of how Digital Navigators works concretely, because I know for me, it's this very high-minded model that it took me a little bit to sort of understand what that meant in practice for our libraries. So this is our workflow. A little visualization, sort of a journey map of how it works. We initially paired this with a program of circulating some laptops and hotspots. And we thought, well, we're going to give people this thing temporarily, right? A thing is not useful if you don't know how to use the thing. And it can even be harmful, right? You can get yourself into some trouble on the internet. So if we're working with people who have not had a lot of experience, have not had a lot of training, we want to make sure we're providing that support, right? That we're giving a holistic supports to people, so that we're not just giving them a thing, we're giving them a means to accomplish their goals. So that was the initial impetus of who the service was for, but now it is just open to any member of the public. We offer an appointment-based system, so we have pre-selected appointment times that patrons can choose from. They can do this either by visiting our website and booking themselves, or recognizing that an online-only portal is not a great way to reach people who may not be online. That's why they need us. There is an entire pathway that is by phone, and you can switch back and forth at any time. Patrons can either call us and say, hey, I want to make an appointment, and any staff member can make the appointment for them, or if they are able, they can do that on their own. As part of the appointment, we ask people to complete an intake. And this is something that I think deviates a little bit from what's often common practice in libraries, but it's really, really helpful, both for meeting the patrons' needs and for our own data. So NDIA created the initial intake form, and we adapted it based on the kind of data that we needed to capture for our library. So some of it is practical. We ask people, hey, what is it that you want to have this appointment about, right? Is it about getting internet access? Is it about getting a device? Is it about getting digital literacy skills? Some combination of the above. But then we also ask them some questions that will help us gather data. In particular, how confident do you feel in your ability to accomplish your goal? So you've told us what your goal is. How do you feel that you have this? How confident are you that you have the skills you need to meet that goal? And that's really important because it gives the navigator, it helps them prepare, right? So that they're selecting appropriate resources, and they know how comfortable people are feeling going in. but then we're going to ask them that same question again at the end, right? And then that allows us to compare, and it gives us some really nice outcome data in a pretty simple way. Prior to the appointment, we do our appointments through Microsoft Teams because that's what we have. That's what we already, we're already working with. And we use LibCal as our appointment booking software. Again, that was just what we had. Because of that, LibCal allows us, patrons get an automated reminder email if they have given us an email. If they have indicated that they want to talk to us by phone, then we give them a call 24 hours before the appointment. Of course, ideally, LibCal was the name of the appointment software. I believe it's a SpringShare product. Yes, okay. Automated reminder email, phone call if possible. Oh, we would love to do these in person, right? Ideally, of course, in person would be great. It gets rid of a lot of the, the sort of tech issues of connecting. It's supportive for people. It lets you look at their screen if they're asking kind of a digital literacy questions. Really helpful. That is not something due to COVID that is available to us yet. So we'll add that third pathway. Okay, so we reminded the patron on the day of the appointment. There are two things a patron can do since the meeting is in Teams, and we have enabled the calling features in Teams. So the patron, when they register, they get a phone number and a link for their meeting. Staff can give it to the phone number to them verbally over the phone, or they get an email with it if that's what they've selected. The patron can then come and enter the team meeting like you would with any Zoom meeting at the appointed time. If they don't show up, if they're having trouble getting connected, we can reach out to them, and staff can initiate that call. Because it's through Teams, that allows us to be flexible. If a patron joins by a link, then it's a virtual meeting and they can see each other. If they join by phone, then it's a phone call. So it allows the patron to get what they need without staff having to have multiple different workflows. The appointment, this is essentially a reference interview. And I think that's a really important thing to remember about digital navigators is that no one is asking you or your staff to be a computer whiz, right? No one is asking you to be the help desk. You're essentially conducting a reference interview, which is something you're great at and that you do every day. You just want to find out what's the patron really trying to do, what's their real need, and what are the best resources to get them there. When someone has a digital literacy question, right, I want to know how to do thing XYZ. If it is a simple factual thing, right, so often it's, hey, I want that emergency broadband benefit. I'm not sure how to fill out a form online, right? I'm not sure how to submit this. Something simple, if you would stand next to them on the floor at a computer and sort of say, okay, let me get you started, click here, then you can do that in the appointment. You can just, help them straight out. But often we do occasionally get questions that are fairly involved or obscure. We actually get quite a lot of questions about file management. A lot of people trying to organize their files, their photos, and trying to figure out how to manage that big, overwhelming flow of data. So for those, we're not necessarily going to be able to answer them in the appointment. We may say, here are some classes that you can take. Here's LinkedIn Learning that we have. We have a library subscription to this, and here's a class that you need. Here's the local Goodwill that's offering a course. Here, here is a database that has something. So we may point people to other resources, just again, as we would in any reference interview. And sometimes we do make follow-up appointments. Someone just needs to work with us a little bit longer. It's not uncommon to make 2 or 3 appointments. Then we follow up immediately afterwards. Thanks so much for the appointment. Here's what we talked about. Here are the links to the resources. Again, if that's an email. And we also check in if they need a follow-up. And then we have an exit survey as well that we would like them to fill out, which they can do themselves online, or we can read it off to them and they can answer. It's very brief. So, and then our goal is also to do some long-term follow-up as we have people's contact information to reach out 3 months later, 6 months later, Did you get what you did, right? The thing that you were trying to accomplish, did you get that internet hookup? Did you get that computer? Did you accomplish the thing that you were trying to build skills to do? This, again, is an area where libraries often do not get this kind of data, and it is very valuable data for funders, for demonstrating impact. Obviously, there's a lot of consideration in how you do this in a way that is respectful of people's private personal information and how you track it. I don't have a lot of time to get into that here. But just a quick second about impact. So we asked people about their confidence before and after, and patrons report a 42% increase in their ability to accomplish their goal after an appointment. Staff observe that patrons have increased their skill 76% of the time. And when we ask patrons what was most helpful about this service, it's not the information. The information is great and they need it and they want it and they appreciate it. But what they really value is the thing they can't get anywhere else, right? There are places to get information if you look hard enough, if you have enough skill. But what really matters to people is the patience of the navigators. The word patience comes up over and over. People are frustrated. They have had bad experiences trying to learn or do these things before. They feel stupid at times because there's something that they have been unable to do. Of course they are not, right? But that's how they feel, because they've gotten stuck on something. So people feel very vulnerable, and having someone walk alongside them without judgment is immensely valuable to people. And that is just one of those things that that libraries are uniquely positioned to provide. So it reinforces for me the importance of this service. So we are at 7 minutes till time. So Sabrina, is there anything else that you want to say to close us out before we go to Q&A?
I'm just really looking forward to seeing what questions folks have. It's a lot of information. There are lots of different ways of modifying the model. Of course, there are additional models that this drew from that are out there in the world for working on digital inclusion and digital equity, like Digital Stewards model. Digital Navigators is like a little kernel from within a larger holistic program. All right, questions from the group.
Okay, hello. Yeah, so we had a question right at the beginning. What was the appointment software that you used?
That was called LibCal, and it's a SpringShare product. I'm sure there are many other things that would work, and appointments are not the only way to do this as well.
Okay, excellent. Another question from Therese M. Sonic is, are you doing any in-person sessions now?
Unfortunately, we are not. My library system, our buildings are fully reopened, but we have not yet resumed in-person programming. We do have a sort of a telehealth kind of a separate telehealth program that might sort of allow us to do remote appointments with some support, but no, basically. Sabrina, are there, but I'm sure that Sabrina, some of the places that you had worked with are doing that or did do that previously. Are there any of those?
Yeah, I know Salt Lake City Public Library is doing some appointments in person. Maybe some folks can write ones that they've heard of in the chat, can share. Time limits.
Okay, moving on to the next question. Katie Ann W says, I am a part of a new Digital Navigators pilot program in St. Paul, Minnesota. Did you use any tools/methods to advertise the service?
That's a great question. So in our case, we did a pretty soft launch. Like many libraries, I think our staffing is a bit stretched at the moment. And so we don't have a lot of people dedicating a lot of time to it. So even just with pretty limited advertising, we've got a page up on our website. You know, we've shared it on social media a few times. Obviously not the most effective way to reach people who aren't online, but even with pretty limited promotion and just kind of referrals as people ask about it, we are booked. we're full. I have not had a week with more than one open appointment since August. And we started in March. So as we add more appointments, we'll hopefully be able to advertise more.
Over at National Digital Inclusion Alliance, I really recommend you having a look at their site, and they have a free option for being a member or affiliate, keeping in touch. But they have a digital navigator model page. And on that page, I'm looking for where they posted the toolkit that was put together, funded by IMLS in partnership with Urban Libraries Council. I linked to it in the presentation, and it's further up in the chat. But that's going to have some details on outreach and engagement. They probably put something in there about in Salt Lake, the team had door, the little signs that have a little hole for the doorknob, and you can just like door hangers, maybe that's what they're called. So the teams of digital navigators and managers went out into neighborhoods and put these on doors and had conversations with neighbors. And they saw engagement with the program spike after each time that they did that.
I love that approach. Love that.
It's pretty great. I would encourage folks not to be afraid of, if you do have a marketing or engagement budget, to do some of that online outreach, because high percentages of folks have mobile, but maybe not laptops or home internet. So while it's definitely true that, maybe you don't want to do outreach where people aren't yet, a lot of them are there, or they have neighbors who are there, and it might be worth doing.
Cool, excellent. A question about the slides. If someone wants the slides for this presentation, could they email you, Sabrina?
Absolutely. I'll put my information here again, and I'll just make a little PDF. Some folks have already started emailing me, so I'm happy to send that out. And more information and questions, if you have them, I'm happy to share.
I'm saying both of our information is on the, contact information is on the slide. So please feel free to reach out to me as well. Not just for the slides, for anything.
Maybe headset recommendations for me.
Okay. Another question. Do you have time limits for each one-to-one appointment? How many appointments can the same person request? Any limits?
So our appointments are set for half an hour to accommodate just staff scheduling and availability. Again, you don't necessarily have to do it that way, but we just let people know off the bat, what they're scheduling with us is a half-hour slot. We don't have a limit on the number of appointments someone can make, and that has not been a problem. The most common thing is a single appointment. Some people need two, and there's like with anything else, there's a couple of people who've come back sort of on repeat. But I wouldn't say there's anyone where it's been an issue or they're abusing the system. They're truly learning each time. So we haven't needed to cap the number, and a half hour has seemed to do it. And if we were finding that it wasn't, we would make it an hour. So it's a little bit arbitrary, but it's working.
Okay, so that seems to be our time for today. Would you guys like to sign off or keep answering questions?
Sure, I'm happy to hang around and answer a few more questions. I don't know what your schedule looks like. I know that we have some more that we haven't gotten to. I know there's also a lot of other fabulous sessions going on that you want to get to. So I'm happy to stick around, but the recording will also be available later.
Okay, it seems the number of participants is dropping, but let's just do maybe one or two more questions. How about that?
Sure, sounds good. And then, and then people can catch them on the recording. Mm-hmm.
Okay. From Bethany Baker, do we reach out to NDIA directly to start a pilot program?
This is not a trademark item. I mean, it's a model. It's just like, hey, you could do it this way. Here's some ideas. You can reach out to them for support. They do consulting on this kind of thing. Is that helpful?
I think that was a very good answer to that question. It certainly clarified it for me. Okay, so the last question that I see in the chat currently is from Elizabeth Lakea. Do people tend to keep their appointments?
No. I mean, yes, you know, we're seeing the same thing that we see with every digital service, every online program. I would say for pretty much across the board, online programs, about half the people who register show up. And digital navigators, I would say we're doing better than that. And that reminder call or email is really essential to that. Also, the ability to call out to people is great, because there have been a few times where someone has just forgotten or had the time wrong or had the day wrong, and you know, we call out to them to initiate the appointment, and then it goes on as normal. There are no shows. Because our appointments are just half an hour. Oftentimes what will happen in those cases, we already know what the question is. So if it's an email, if the person has given us an email, we will email them a list of resources, right? We'll use that time. We don't get as much in-depth information as we would have, you know, if we'd been able to talk to them, but we'll take what we have and, you know, email them a resource list. Or even put together a brief resource list and then call them and leave a message if it's a phone meeting. So we can still use that time to serve the patron and invite them to make another appointment. We expected some level of no-shows, and we do get them, but it's okay.
Okay, well, I think that just about wraps up all the questions in the chat. There is a multitude of people thanking you for your wonderful presentation. I also truly enjoyed it. Thank you again, Sabrina and Audrey, and congratulations. Yeah, so I just assume stop the session if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Laura. Thanks, Sabrina. See you soon.
Thank you. Take care.